Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bread of Life. Very quickly, I want to speak to you about what you must do at times of visitations. You see, the eternal purpose of the Lord Jesus is designed to be fulfilled in the structure of times and seasons. All through the scriptures, Genesis to Revelations, you see the promises of God, and you also see how that an appointed time is set for their fulfillment. Each time these appointed seasons arrive, okay, it always requires active participation. The kingdom always longs to have a people on the earth through whom the kingdom can advance and push through for the fulfillment of what? Of the purposes of God set to be fulfilled in that time and season. So, yes, a Kairos moment shows up, okay? A significant, predestined, prophesied Kairos moment shows up. But you see, the fulfillment of what has been written to be accomplished at that point in time always falls back on how much the Lord finds a people on the earth, okay, ready to ride and drive the fulfillment of that prophetic word. We see this in the promise the Lord made to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15. The Lord establishing a covenant with Abraham told Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed, this is Genesis 15 from verse 13, that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So you see a promise God was making to Abraham, okay? That was the time God was establishing a significant covenant with Abraham and went on to give him the promise and even a timeline. It says, your seed will serve 400 years, they will afflict them, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come hither. Can you see that? Extremely significant, extremely profound and significant. So here the Lord is what? Is speaking very particularly, okay, about what? A promise that he's given to Abraham that will play out in the timeline of his seeds, but he goes on to tell him what? The timeline of the fulfillment of that promise. Now we know from the scriptures, when that time came, God had to raise up Moses. Moses accepted to do the assignment, and then what? He was sent to the Israelites. So you see the journey they had to undertake in coming out from Egypt, but you see back over and over again, the Lord had to wrestle with that generation because they were rebellious and they were a murmuring generation. And that generation, though being in the timeline of the Lord, did not fulfill. That prophetic word was not fulfilled in their days. The Lord had to wait for another generation and what? An extension of another 40 years. So you see very what? Profound revelation of times and seasons to a precise point, but the kingdom requiring what? A people on the earth through whom the Lord will do what? Will advance the purposes of the Lord. Now the same thing when the promise of the Messiah was given. The Lord Jesus would come, the Messiah would come. The thing the Messiah would fulfill was clearly written in the law and the prophets. But what you see when he came, there was a whole lot of what? Of war that and rejection, or that's the best way to put it. You see how the people missed their times of visitation in the words of the Lord Jesus Christ himself. You see this in Luke chapter 19 from verse 41. And he see when he was coming into the city, he says, and when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if thou hast known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace. Can you see that? So if they had known, that's what Jesus was saying to them. In this thy day, it means that was an appointed day. That was an appointed time of visitation. That was written in the eternal purposes of God, that this is a time of visitation. So he cried and he wept over it. It says, if you had known in this thy day the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon the other. Then he told them why this would happen to them. It says, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Think about this for a moment. about significant moments of visitation. Look at the Lord speaking to Samuel, okay, and the Lord visiting Samuel and calling out his name. Did you see that? And Samuel going to Eli the first time, the second time, until he was taught what to do. So he had to be taught what to do in the day of his visitation. It was not just enough that the Lord is standing there. You see in Revelation chapter 3, when the Lord wrote the letter to the Laodicean church, he says, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock." It wasn't enough for the Lord to be present amongst them. They needed to know what to do on the day of their visitation. So he said, if any man would hear and will do what? And will open the door. He said, I will come in and sup with him and he with me. So at every point in time, at the timeline of visitations, there is always something that the kingdom requires of those to whom this visitation is brought. Now the question is, what they do at those moments of visitation will determine whether the promises of the Lord is fulfilled and is delivered to them at those significant times of visitations. Every one of us have significant moments of visitation. Our nations, our cities, our churches, our assemblies, everything for which the Lord has written concerning us, as the psalmist said in Psalm 139, he says, all my days are written in your books. There are things written in the books concerning you, concerning your city, your family, your church, your assembly, your nation, and the nations of the world that are spread out in the times and the seasons of God that would come in their appointed times. But you see, you must know what to do. You must know what to do at the time of that visitation. And the most significant thing is that there must be a time when you consecrate yourself. Now, one critical thing you must learn to do is that you must understand that you must surrender yourself to the Lord. The Lord, you would see what happened to the disciples. Once they broke their routine and left everything and followed the Lord in those moments of visitation, they received everything that Jesus brought to them. Now, Samuel had to break his routine of sleep to do what? To say, speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. You see, those moments of visitation, the Lord had to break the routine of the Israelites, okay, their daily routine, and began to move amongst them, because he was going to tell them when to leave, when to be awake, and when to leave Israel at the time when these judgments are complete. One of the things the Lord needs to do is what you must bring him and give him permission to come into your cycle of daily routines. And that is how, when you invite the Lord into your cycle of daily routines, then he comes in and begins to bring to you what you need at the time of your visitation. But you see, one of the ways that visitations are missed is what we do in our routine cycles, because it can keep us from what the Lord wants to bring. So the first thing is consecrate your cycles and your routines to the Lord, so that he brings you into his timeline and what he's written to take place within those timelines of your visitation, so that you can receive everything that Jesus has for you. This is the first thing you must do. And once you do this, the Lord will lead you in your responses, so that you come into everything that the Lord has for you to do, to receive his visitations for your life, for your city, for your church, for your assembly, for your nation, in the times of your visitations. This is a Bread of Life to you. There are many other teachings in the Bread of Life series that will bless your heart. I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel Ministries of Abel Praise, and you'd have access to these wonderful teachings. It's always a great honor to bring you the Bread of Life.